Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study of the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 20. We are, again, David is on the run, so, things that kind of started off very glorious for David, right? Here he is a kid, a teenager, tending his father's sheep. The prophet, right, comes to town. Everyone knew Samuel was a prophet. They respected him. They feared him. And he comes to David's house and anoints him king. Great, right? Except for the paranoia and the fear and the jealousy of Saul. This is sort of the consequences of when Israel asked for a king. I said this a few chapters ago. It is very possible that had they waited for God, God would have given them David. But instead, they get Saul first, and Saul becomes a disaster because of his wickedness. We see his heart. And that's going to bring a lot of heartaches. And that's the sad thing. So let's get into it. 1 Samuel chapter 20. David is on the run. Verse 1 says, David fled from Naioth in Ramah and came to Jonathan and asked, "What have I done? What did I do wrong? How have I sinned against your father so that he wants to take my life?" Now, I'm sure we can all think about this, right? That sometimes you ask, what is going on here? Especially when you do all that you can to do what is right. And from David's perspective now, it seems like all of his goodness is being rewarded with evil. Now, on the other hand, of course, he's not, because of the anguish of this, it's hard to see how God is preserving him. But you also can understand, man, what the heck is going on? You can understand his anguish of this. Verse 2 says, Jonathan said to him, "No, you won't die. Listen, my father doesn't do anything great or small without telling me, so why would he hide this matter from me? And this can't be true." Well, aside from the fact that Saul has been doing nothing but trying to destroy David. That is kind of, Jonathan is kind of like out of touch here, but I'm sorry, ever since the women came in town saying, Saul killed his thousands, David his 10,000, Saul has from that day sought to destroy David. Verse 3. But David said, "Your father certainly knows that you have come to look favorably on me. He has said Jonathan must know of this, or else he would be grieved." David also swore, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as yourself live, there is but a step between me and death." Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." So David told him, "Look, tomorrow is the new moon, and I'm supposed to sit down and eat with the king. Instead, let me go, and I'll hide in the field until the night." Now, the new moon was a kind of a celebration. And of course, for good reason, David doesn't want to go and eat the meal with the king. Normally, this would have been an honor, right? I'm sitting at the king's table. But the last few times that David has been in Saul's presence, he's thrown a spear at him, trying to pin him against the wall. So David is now like, okay, I've kind of had enough of this. It won't be good if I eat in the presence of your father. Verse 6. If your father misses me at all and says, "David urgently requested my permission quickly to go to his town Bethlehem for an annual sacrifice there involving the whole clan." If he says good, then your servant is safe. But if he becomes angry, you will know he has evil intentions. So kind of a good test. We'll see how that comes out. Of course it's going to come out wrong. Verse 8. Deal faithfully with your servant, for you have brought me into a covenant with you before the Lord. If I have done anything wrong, then kill me yourself. Why take me to your father? No, Jonathan responded. If I ever find out that my father has evil intentions against you, wouldn't I tell you about it? So David asked Jonathan, who will tell me if your father answers you harshly? He answered David, come on, let's go out to the field. So both of them went out to the field. By the Lord, the God of Israel, I will sound out my father by this time tomorrow or the next day. If I find out that he is favorable towards you, I will not send for you or tell you. If my father intends to bring evil upon you, may God punish Jonathan and do so severely if I do not tell you, and send you away so that you can go in peace. May the Lord be with you, just as he was with my father. If I continue to live, treat me with the Lord's faithful love. But if I die, don't even withdraw your faithful love from my household, not even when the Lord cuts off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth. Now, David will sadly fulfill this. And it's kind of interesting that Jonathan is saying this. It's kind of interesting because sort of a foreshadowing here. Verse 16, then Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord hold David's enemies accountable. Now, again, as I said, David will honor this. We will see this kind of later on. He's going to be good to the descendants of Jonathan. Verse 17, Jonathan once again swore to David in his love for him because he loved him as he loved himself. Then Jonathan said to him, tomorrow, the new moon, you will be missed because your seat will be empty. The following day, hurry down and go to the place where you hid on the day this incident began, and stand beside the rock Ezel. I will shoot 3 arrows beside it as if I'm aiming at a target. Then I will send the young man and say, go and find the arrows. Now, if I expressly say to the young man, look, the arrows are on this side of you, get them, then come because the Lord lives. It is safe for you to come. It is safe for you, and there is no problem. But if I say to the youth, look, the arrows are beyond you, then go, for the Lord is sending you away. As for the matter you have spoken about, the Lord will be a witness between you and me forever, meaning the covenant which David will honor. Verse 24, so David hid in the field. And at the new moon, the king sat down to eat the meal. He sat at his usual place on the seat by the wall. Jonathan sat facing him, and Abner took his place beside Saul. Now remember, by the way, Abner is Saul's brother. But David's place was empty. Saul did not say anything that day because he thought something unexpected has happened. He must be ceremonially unclean. Yet that is it. He is unclean. Now, under the law, remember, and in David's case, it was kind of plausible to think this because he could have eaten by him killing, being a military man at the very least, killing people, that could have made him unclean. Verse 27, however, the day after the new moon, the second day, David's place was still empty, and Saul asked his son Jonathan, why didn't Jesse's son come to the meal, either yesterday or today? Jonathan answered, David asked for my permission to go to Bethlehem. He said, please let me go because our clan is holding a sacrifice in the town, and my brother has told me to be there. So now, if you're pleased with me, let me go so I can see my brothers. That is why he didn't come to the king's table. Then Saul became angry with Jonathan and shouted, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman. Now that phrase there would be really us saying you son of a bee, right? Really talking about his mama too, right? So he says, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman, do not know that you are siding with Jesse's son to your own shame and to the disgrace of your mother. You know, the mother he just insulted. What is even sadder is that when you see someone in this kind of state that they don't even recognize, it is not Jonathan the one who is shamed. It is Saul himself the one who is shamed. But when you have a dictatorship like this, you can't speak against the king. This is something we can't understand because we live in a democracy. We can curse our president. We can talk about our president, and we're not going to go to jail for it. You couldn't do it then. That's why I said it's even sadder, because while he's saying, you're doing this to your shame, everyone around the table is kind of like, no, Jonathan ain't doing anything wrong. You're the problem. But he's the king. Verse 31. Every day Jesse's son lives on the earth, you and your kingship is not secure. Now send for him and bring him to me. He deserves to die. Now, he's crazy. He's paranoid, right? Yet, what he is saying is, in a sense, true. But the paranoia, and what is crazy about this, is that it's true because God is the one who is giving him the kingdom. And Saul is trying to fight against the decrees of God, the sovereignty of God. And remember, Saul, when we go all the way back to the very beginning, this is where Saul got into trouble. Remember, he took it upon himself to offer a sacrifice. And that's when he lost the kingdom. So now he's trying to, in his own might and strength, to preserve his kingdom. And he's going to fail miserably. Verse 32, Jonathan answered his father back, why is he to be killed? What has he done? Then Saul threw his spirit Jonathan to kill him. And so he knew that his father was determined to kill David. He got up from the table in fierce anger and did not eat any food the second day of the new moon, for he was grieved because of his father's shameful behavior towards David. In other words, he could not even give a good answer why he wants David killed. In other words, if he was to ask, why do you want to kill David? He couldn't answer. Verse 35, in the morning, Jonathan went out to the field for the appointed meeting with David. As a small young man was with him, he said to the young man, run and find the arrows I am shooting. As the young man ran, Jonathan shot an arrow beyond him. He came to the location of the arrow that Jonathan had shot, but Jonathan called and said to him, the arrow is beyond you, isn't it? Then Jonathan called to him, hurry up and don't stop. Jonathan, the young man, picked up the arrow and returned to his master. He did not know anything, only Jonathan and David knew the arrangement. And Jonathan gave his equipment to the young man who was with him and said, go take it back to the city. And when the young man had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone Ezel, fell on his face to the ground, and bowed 3 times. In other words, he knew from that demonstration that the news wasn't good. Then he and Jonathan kissed each other and wept with each other, though David wept more. Jonathan said to David, go in the assurance the two of us pledged in the name of the Lord, when he said, the Lord will be a witness between you and me, between my offspring and your offspring. And David left, and Jonathan went into the city. Now, again, it's kind of, at this point, it's sad because Jonathan, in a sense, is caught between the two. And, he knows his father's crazy, but he can't do anything about it because his father's the king. All right, verse 1. So now, of course, things are just getting worse for David, right? In other words, if David is thinking, wait a minute, I thought I was supposed to be the king. I thought the Lord was with me. And yet, you see this, the king himself, Saul, is doing everything he can to destroy David. Verse 1. Now, one of the good things is that you can be assured that if God has called you to something, if God will preserve you. Verse 1 says, David went to Ahimelech, the priest at Nob. Ahimelech was afraid to meet David, so he said to him, "Why are you alone and no one is with you?" Then David answered Ahimelech the priest, "The king gave me a mission, and he told me, 'Don't let anyone know anything about the mission I'm sending you on, or what I've ordered you to do. I have stationed my young men at a certain place. Now, what do you have in hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, whatever can be found." The priest told him, "There is no ordinary bread on hand. However, there is a consecrated bread. But the young men may eat it if only they've kept themselves from women." Now, that's not always necessarily true. However, you will note this particular incident that Jesus will quote to the Pharisees, how and counteracting their ridiculous religious practices. And David will quote this and said that the priest gave the bread to David and are blameless, meaning blameless before God. Verse 5, David answered him, "I swear that women are being kept from us, as always when I go out to battle. The young men's bodies are consecrated even on the ordinary mission. So of course their bodies are consecrated today." So the priest gave him the consecrated bread. Now this was the bread that was kept in the house of God. Okay, so it wasn't the common bread. In other words, let's say if you had the temple service and you had a food pantry, well, you wouldn't even normally touch that bread. But the priest gave David this because David was on the run. Verse 6, so the priest gave him the consecrated bread, for there was no bread there except the bread of the presence, meaning the holy bread, and that had been removed from the presence of the Lord. And when the bread was removed, it had been replaced with warm bread. One of Saul's servants, now this is kind of sad here, we'll see later, but one of Saul's servants detained before the Lord was there that day. His name was Doeg, it's actually Dog, but Doeg, Doeg, the Edomite, chief of Saul's shepherds. Now we're going to see this later on, why he is mentioning Dog or Doeg, okay? And David said to Ahimelech, "Do you have a spear or sword on hand?" And that I didn't even bring my sword or the weapons, since the king's mission was urgent. Now David is kind of lying here, right? And then but he's on the run. Verse 9, the priest replied, "The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Eli, is here, wrapped in the cloth behind the ephod. If you want to take it for yourself, then take it. But there isn't another one here." "There is none like it," David said. "Give it to me." So David fled that day from Saul's presence and went to the king at Achish of Gath. But Achish's servant said to him, "Isn't this David's king? I mean, isn't this David the king of the land? Didn't they sing about him doing dances?" Now again, this is kind of making things worse for David when he says this. Like, I'm not the king yet, right? I'm not the king. So when you say that, you're going to incense Saul even more. But notice what happens right here. He goes to Gath. Remember, this is the land of the Philistines. And we'll get more in this in the next couple of chapters, how even David himself begins to be so distraught that he does some crazy things. And this is kind of like one of them, as he goes to Achish of Gath, okay? But Achish's servant said to him, "Isn't this David, the king of the land?" Actually, it was Saul. "Don't they sing about him doing their dances?" They only sung once. "Saul has killed his thousands, but David his 10,000s. And David took this to heart and became very afraid of the king of Achish of Gath. So he pretended to be insane in their presence, and he acted like a madman around them, scribbling on the doors of the gate and letting his saliva run down his beard. Look, you can see the man is crazy." Achish said to his servants, "Why did you bring him to me? Do I have such a shortage of crazy people that you brought this one to act crazy around me? Is this And he said, is this one going to come into my house? Now, what's going to be interesting is that we're going to see another kind of, even from David's, as he is distressed and feels worthless. We're getting this again in a few chapters. But this one, when he realizes now, oops, I might have made a mistake, so he kind of pretends to be insane. He pretends to be insane, and then they said, well, take this crazy man out. Why did y'all bring him here? He starts to just jibble jabble and let his spit fall down. Anyway, but we're seeing here where David is like, I have nowhere to go in my homeland, because Saul is going to hunt me down. And we will see that. All right, we'll pick this up in chapter 22 next time. I'll see you then.